Essie Johnson was 45 years old, a woman whose presence could never be ignored. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that had been carved out of hardship, perseverance, and an iron will to survive in a world that had rarely been gentle with her. At 5'5", with full hips and a body that told the story of motherhood and late-night shifts spent hunched over spreadsheets, she was not the type of woman magazines splashed across their covers, but to those who knew her, Essie radiated something far more enduring than beauty, an aura of warmth, loyalty, and resilience that made people feel safe in her orbit. Her dark, caramel-toned skin seemed to glow under the soft, morning light that streamed through the blinds of her modest suburban home in New Jersey. The house wasn't large, but it was hers. Every photo frame on the wall, every throw blanket draped across the couch carried a piece of her journey from the single mother years, when she worked 2 jobs to raise her daughter, to the triumphant purchase of this very home at the age of 38. Essie had built this life with her own hands, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe she could finally rest. And then, 2 years ago, he walked into her world. Anthony was everything she thought she wanted, tall, with a smile that had the strange ability to silence every doubt she had carried about herself. He was a businessman, polished and ambitious, who claimed to see in her not just a woman, but the woman. He said she was real, unlike the shallow women he had dated before. He called her his queen, and after years of loneliness, Essie wanted to believe it now. On this quiet Thursday morning, she stood in the kitchen humming softly as she scrambled eggs, the smell of butter and pepper curling through the air. Anthony was still asleep upstairs. He had flown back late the night before from one of his business trips, and she had let him rest. She liked caring for him, pampering him, the way she had never been allowed to pamper herself. "Breakfast is almost ready," she called up the stairs, her voice light with a tenderness that surprised even her. She wasn't used to this gentleness, this softness. Life had taught her to be hard, to protect herself. But with Anthony, she had lowered her armor. As she set the table, her eyes drifted to the envelope sitting on the counter. Inside was the wire transfer confirmation, $20,000, money she had loaned Anthony only last month. He had told her it was for a short-term investment, something guaranteed to pay back double. At first, she had hesitated. That money had been her savings, carefully put away over the years. But Anthony had looked her in the eye, his voice low, his hand warm on hers. "Baby, trust me. This is for us, for our future." She wanted to believe in a future. She wanted to believe in him, so she had signed the papers and sent the money. Essie stirred the eggs harder than she meant to, a nervous flutter twisting in her chest. It wasn't just the money. It was the way Anthony had been distant lately, taking calls in the other room, locking his phone with a new passcode, disappearing on weekends with vague explanations. She had asked questions, gentle ones, not accusations, and he had laughed them off, kissing her forehead and calling her paranoid. Still, the unease lingered. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs pulled her from her thoughts. Anthony appeared, wearing a navy blue suit that hugged his frame perfectly. He looked sharp, commanding, the kind of man people instinctively respected. His dark eyes locked on hers, and he smiled, the kind of smile that could melt every doubt if she let it. "Smells good, babe," he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. "You spoil me." Essie felt the warmth spread across her skin. "Well, someone's got to. You work too hard." They sat together, eating breakfast like any ordinary couple. To anyone looking in, it might have seemed idyllic. The successful businessman and his devoted partner sharing a quiet morning in their beautiful home. But Essie noticed things: how Anthony barely touched his food, how his phone buzzed 3 times in 10 minutes, how his eyes flickered to it with a sharpness he tried to hide. "Another deal?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," he said quickly, too quickly. "Nothing big, just a client being needy." Essie forced a smile. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe the man who had swept her off her feet was still the same man sitting across from her now. But deep down, something in her gut whispered otherwise. Later that afternoon, Essie met her friend Carla at a small cafe downtown. Carla was the opposite of Essie, loud, outspoken, unwilling to let anyone play her for a fool. She sipped her latte, eyes narrowing, as Essie told her about the loan, about the distance, about the unease gnawing at her chest. "Girl," Carla said bluntly, slamming her cup on the table, "you need to open your damn eyes. Men like Anthony don't borrow 20 grand for you. They borrow it for them." Essie bristled, defensive. "He loves me, Carla. He talks about building a future." Carla cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Please, talking is easy. You know what's hard. Actions. Show me the actions, Essie. Show me where that man is proving he's here for you. Essie's throat tightened. She didn't have an answer. That night, alone in bed, while Anthony worked late again, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Memories of her past heartbreaks crowded her mind. Memories of men who had promised everything and delivered nothing. She had sworn she would never let anyone use her again. And yet here she was, doubting, fearing, wondering. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Anthony. Don't wait up. Meeting ran late. Love you. Essie stared at the screen for a long time before finally setting it down. Something was happening. Something she couldn't name, but could feel deep in her bones. And for the first time in 2 years, she felt the first crack splinter through the illusion of her perfect love. Story. The following week unfolded like a movie. Essie couldn't turn off a movie in which she played both the devoted lover and the silent detective, watching the man she loved with new eyes. Anthony had always been busy. He lived on phone calls, deadlines, and meetings that stretched long into the night. At first, Essie had admired it. His ambition had seemed sexy, a sign of a man with direction and purpose. But now she saw it differently. His phone was practically an extension of his hand, and she had noticed the way he angled the screen away from her when he typed. One evening, Essie stood in the kitchen washing dishes when Anthony's phone buzzed on the counter. He was upstairs showering. She wiped her hands, glanced at the glowing screen and froze. The message preview read, "Can't wait to see you again tonight. Same hotel." Essie's pulse thundered in her ears. Her hand hovered over the phone. Trembling, she didn't dare unlock it. His new passcode made sure of that, but the words were enough. Her stomach churned violently as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. When Anthony came downstairs 10 minutes later, fresh and smelling of expensive cologne, Essie's world felt like it had split in two. The man smiling at her as if nothing was wrong, and the reality of the message still burning in her mind. "Baby," he said smoothly, buttoning his shirt, "I've got a late meeting. Don't wait up." Essie forced her lips into a smile so brittle it might shatter. "Of course," she whispered. The door shut behind him, and she stood frozen in her kitchen, the faucet still running, water spilling over her hands. She wanted to scream, to call Carla, to demand answers, but instead, she shut off the water, wiped her hands, and sat at the table in silence. The next day, she confided in Carla. "I saw the message," Essie whispered, her voice raw. He's seeing someone else. I know it." Carla's eyes flashed with anger. "And you're still sitting here making excuses for him. Essie, wake up. That man is running game on you. He's got your money, your heart, your time. What else does he need to steal before you're done?" Essie flinched. The truth was too sharp, too loud. "But what if I'm wrong?" she murmured. "What if it's business?" "Business," Carla cut in, her voice rising. "Business doesn't text you about hotel rooms. Don't play dumb." Essie pressed her hands to her face. Her chest felt tight, as if the air itself was strangling her. She wanted to deny it, to believe in the Anthony she loved, the man who had whispered promises into her ear at night, the man who had sworn he wanted forever. But the image of that message wouldn't leave her. That evening, unable to stand the uncertainty, Essie made a decision that scared her more than anything she had ever done. She followed him. When Anthony left for his meeting, she waited 5 minutes before slipping into her car and trailing him at a careful distance. Her palms were slick on the steering wheel, her breath shallow, her heart hammering. He drove across town, pulling into the parking lot of a Marriott hotel. Essie's stomach dropped. She parked 2 rows back, her hands gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. She watched as Anthony stepped out, his suit jacket sharp against the night air, and walked toward the glass doors. And then another woman appeared, tall, slim, her hair flowing in waves down her back. She laughed, the sound carrying even across the parking lot. As she slipped her arm into Anthony's, Essie's world shattered. She couldn't breathe, she couldn't move. All she could do was watch as the man she loved disappeared into the hotel with another woman. Their bodies close, their laughter echoing like nails across her heart. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to storm out, to scream, to tear the truth from him with her bare hands, but instead, she sat frozen, the betrayal searing itself into her soul like fire. When Anthony came home past midnight, Essie was waiting at the kitchen table. "Where were you?" she asked softly, her voice deadly calm. He blinked, surprised. "I told you I had a meeting." Essie's hands trembled under the table. "At the Marriott." For the briefest second, Anthony's eyes flickered, then he laughed, too loud, too smooth. Baby, come on. I met a client there. That's all. Don't tell me you followed me. Essie swallowed hard, shame and anger tangling in her chest. She wanted to confront him, to scream the truth she had seen with her own eyes, but when he leaned down, cupping her face, whispering, "You know you're the only woman I love," the words hooked into her heart like claws. She wanted to believe. God help her. She wanted to believe, but belief couldn't erase what she had seen. Over the next week, Essie lived in two worlds. The world Anthony presented, where he was the devoted partner, and the darker world her instincts whispered about, where he was lying, cheating, using her. The dissonance gnawed at her until she barely recognized herself. At work, she sat at her desk staring blankly at her computer screen, unable to focus. At night, she lay awake next to Anthony, his arm draped over her, while her mind replayed the hotel parking lot over and over again. One evening, after Anthony left again, Essie opened her laptop and began searching. She pulled up the bank statements, the credit card charges. What she saw made her blood run cold. Dinners at expensive restaurants she had never been to, hotel charges on nights he claimed to be working late, jewelry store receipts she had never received gifts from. Her hands shook as she scrolled, bile rising in her throat. The truth was no longer just suspicion. It was there, in black and white, undeniable. Anthony wasn't just cheating. He was spending her money to do it. Essie closed the laptop slowly, her entire body trembling. For years, she had prided herself on being strong, independent, unshakable, but now, sitting alone in the dark, she felt like a fool. A 45-year-old fool who had handed her savings to a man who smiled while he destroyed her. Her tears came hot and fast, soaking her cheeks, dripping onto her shirt. But beneath the heartbreak, beneath the despair, something else flickered to life, a spark of rage. And for the first time, Essie thought, no more. Essie had never thought of herself as weak. For 45 years, life had demanded too much strength from her to allow weakness. She had raised a daughter alone, juggled bills when there wasn't enough money to go around, and endured heartbreaks that might have crushed someone else entirely. But sitting alone at her dining room table, her laptop screen glowing with evidence of Anthony's betrayal, Essie felt something she hadn't felt in years: humiliation. Her savings, the very foundation of her security, wasn't just gone. It had been siphoned away, dollar by dollar, into hotel rooms, dinners, and gifts that belonged to another woman. He didn't just betray me, she thought bitterly. He robbed me. The words echoed in her mind like a drumbeat, and the more she repeated them, the less she felt like crying, and the more she felt like burning. The next morning, Essie didn't call Anthony. She didn't cook breakfast or text him good luck on his meetings. Instead, she called Carla. "Girl," Carla answered, her voice still heavy with sleep. "Do you know what time it is?" "It's time," Essie said, her voice steady in a way that surprised her. Carla sat up instantly. "Time for what?" "Time I stopped being a fool." They met later that afternoon at Carla's office. Carla wasn't just Essie's best friend. She was also one of the sharpest paralegals at a downtown law firm. She didn't play around when it came to paperwork, contracts, or the law. "Okay," Carla said, sliding her glasses onto her nose. "You need to start protecting yourself. First question, was the money you gave him a gift or a loan?" Essie hesitated. "He said it was an investment for us. He promised it would come back double. I trusted him." Carla's lips tightened. "So, no paperwork, no written contract." Essie shook her head. "Damn," Carla muttered. "That makes it tricky, but not impossible. If he used your money for personal stuff like hotels and jewelry, we might be able to argue fraud. You've got bank statements, right?" Essie nodded. "Good start. Printing everything, every charge you don't recognize. Highlight it. If he tries to walk away, we're going to be ready." For the first time in weeks, Essie felt a flicker of power return. It wasn't much, but it was something she could hold on to while the rest of her world crumbled. That night, Anthony breezed through the front door, his smile polished, his cologne expensive. He dropped his briefcase on the couch and leaned in to kiss her cheek. "You okay, babe? You've been quiet." Essie held his gaze, her expression unreadable. "I've just been thinking." "About what?" "About money." His smile faltered for a split second before snapping back into place. "Don't worry about that. I told you, the investment's almost ready to pay out." Essie forced a nod, her stomach twisting at the lies rolling so easily off his tongue. She wondered if he even realized how obvious he was now, or if he had simply convinced himself she would never question him. But she was questioning. She was watching, and soon, she would act. The following weekend, Carla arranged a meeting for Essie with one of the firm's attorneys, a nonsense woman named Marjorie Fields. Marjorie was in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked like it could cut glass. Her eyes were sharp, her voice steady, and she wasted no time. "Essie," Marjorie said, flipping through the file Carla had prepared, "this is serious. Based on what you've told us, Anthony may have committed fraud, possibly even theft if we can prove intent. But here's the thing, you're emotionally tied to him. That's what he's counting on. Men like him prey on women who give them the benefit of the doubt." Essie's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to insist that Anthony wasn't that kind of man, but the evidence in the file said otherwise. "So what do I do?" Essie asked quietly. "You document everything," Marjorie said firmly. "Every phone call, every text, every receipt. If he tries to take more from you, don't stop him. Let him hang himself with his own rope. And when the time comes, we'll be ready to drag him into court." Essie exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging under the weight of it all. Court, fraud, words. She had never imagined attaching to the man who once called her his queen. But now, she realized, Anthony wasn't a king. He was a thief. That night, Essie sat at her desk with a stack of papers spread out before her. Credit card charges, bank transfers, texts that felt suddenly sinister when read in the cold light of truth. For every document she highlighted, her resolve grew sharper. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was about survival. And yet, when Anthony came home and slid into bed beside her, wrapping his arm around her waist as if nothing were wrong, Essie's chest still ached with grief. Because once upon a time, she had loved this man. She had given him her trust, her body, her savings, her dreams. Now, she was preparing to take it all back. The transformation was slow but undeniable. Over the next week, Essie moved differently. She smiled less, watched more. She stopped asking Anthony where he was going, and started noting the times he left and returned. She no longer tried to catch him. In life she collected them, storing them like ammunition. Anthony noticed the change. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching TV, he glanced at her with a frown. "You've been distant," he said. "Something wrong?" Essie forced a small smile. "Just tired." But inside, she was wide awake. The final straw came 2 nights later. Essie was cleaning out the laundry basket when she found a hotel keycard in Anthony's suit pocket. She held it in her hand, the plastic cool against her skin, and felt a surge of rage so strong she nearly screamed. Instead, she slipped it into her desk drawer with the rest of the evidence. By the time Anthony came home, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, calm and unreadable. "Hey babe," he said, kissing the top of her head. "What's for dinner?" "Nothing tonight," Essie replied, her voice flat. "I'm not hungry." Anthony frowned, but didn't push. He never noticed the way her eyes lingered on him, sharp and calculating, as if memorizing every move. Later that night, as she lay awake beside him, Essie whispered to herself, so softly Anthony couldn't hear, "You thought you could break me, but you don't know who I am. You're going to find out." The house no longer felt like home. Every wall hummed with unspoken lies. Every silence between Essie and Anthony stretched tighter, like the string of a violin pulled too far. By day, they performed their roles, the devoted couple, laughing politely when neighbors waved from their porches. But at night, the air was thick with mistrust, and Essie could barely stand the sound of his breathing beside her. Still, she played her part. For now, Essie had learned something important from Marjorie, the attorney. In order to win, she couldn't just be angry, she had to be smart. That meant gathering evidence, staying calm, and above all, never letting Anthony know she was onto him. So Essie cooked his favorite meals, asked about his work trips, even kissed him goodbye in the mornings. But behind her smile, she watched like a hawk. Every receipt he left crumpled in his pockets, she smoothed out and stored in a folder. Every late-night phone call he took in the bathroom, she recorded the time and duration in a small notebook. The hotel keycard in her drawer was just the beginning. Soon she had an entire arsenal of proof. One Saturday morning, Essie's daughter, Maya, dropped by unexpectedly. At 21, Maya was sharp, ambitious, and fiercely protective of her mother. She walked into the kitchen with a coffee in hand and narrowed her eyes immediately. "Mom, are you okay? You look different." Essie forced a smile. "I'm fine, baby, just tired." Maya didn't buy it. She glanced around the spotless kitchen, her eyes landing on Anthony's leather briefcase slouched in the corner. "It's him, isn't it?" "Something's wrong." Essie hesitated. She wanted to spill everything, to fall into her daughter's arms and sob the truth. but she couldn't not yet. Maya's temper was too fiery, and if she confronted Anthony now, the entire plan would collapse. Trust me, Essie said softly, reaching for her daughter's hand. I've got this under control. Maya studied her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. Just don't let him play you, Mom. You deserve better. Essie's throat tightened. I know I do, she thought, and I'm going to prove it. That evening, Anthony came home later than usual. Essie was already seated at the dining table, her laptop open. He tossed his jacket over a chair and leaned in to kiss her cheek. What are you working on? Just bills, Essie replied, clicking her mouse casually. In reality, she had just transferred copies of their shared bank account statements to an encrypted folder. Anthony poured himself a drink and dropped onto the couch, scrolling through his phone. His face lit up with a grin Essie hadn't seen directed at her in weeks. She watched his reflection in the glass of the window, the way his fingers danced quickly across the screen, texting her, no doubt the woman who wore the clothes Essie's savings had paid for. For a moment, Essie's chest burned with fury, so sharp she almost slammed the laptop shut, but instead, she took a deep breath and reminded herself, not yet. Let him dig his own grave. Days blurred together in a tense routine. Anthony lied, and Essie pretended to believe him, but beneath the surface, the balance of power was shifting. One night, when Anthony fell asleep with his phone still in his hand, Essie carefully slipped it away. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it. His passcode was the same as always, his birthday, as if he had never considered the possibility of being caught. Her stomach turned as she scrolled through the messages, dozens of texts, each more intimate than the last. Pictures, hotel bookings, promises of forever. Essie copied everything to a backup drive, her heart pounding so loudly she was afraid it would wake him. When she finally set the phone back on his chest, her hands were steady. The evidence was no longer whispers or suspicions, it was hard proof, and soon, it would be enough to destroy him. The following week, Anthony announced he would be traveling for business again. Essie smiled sweetly. How long will you be gone? 2 nights, maybe 3, he replied, avoiding her eyes. You'll be okay. I'll be fine, she said, and she was, because the moment he walked out the door, Essie and Carla followed. Carla's car trailed Anthony's sleek sedan at a careful distance. They watched as he checked into a downtown hotel, not even bothering to disguise himself. From their vantage point in the parking lot, Essie's stomach knotted as she saw him embrace a younger woman in the lobby. There it is, Carla muttered, snapping pictures with her phone. He just made our job 10 times easier. Essie's hands clenched in her lap. Her chest ached with betrayal, but she forced herself to focus. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about winning. When Anthony disappeared into the elevator with his mistress, Essie leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. She wasn't sure if she wanted to scream, cry, or laugh. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." Carla glanced at her. "For what?" "For showing me exactly who he is." The next morning, Essie sat across from Marjorie at the law office, sliding over the folder of evidence. Hotel receipts, text messages, bank statements, photos. Marjorie raised an eyebrow as she flipped through the pile. "You've been busy." "I've been patient," Essie corrected. Her voice was steady now, stronger than it had been in months. Marjorie smiled thinly. "Then it's time to move. We'll file suit. Fraud, theft, whatever we can stick. And when he tries to deny it, we'll bury him with proof." Essie nodded, her pulse steady. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. Anthony thought she was weak. He thought he could take her money, her love, her dignity, and walk away untouched. But now, the trap was set, and soon, he would learn exactly how dangerous it was to underestimate Essie James. Anthony prided himself on being the kind of man who could read people. It was one of the reasons he'd been so successful, whether it was at his job or in his relationships. He always knew exactly what to say, how to charm, how to manipulate. But lately, something about Essie unsettled him. She still cooked his favorite meals, still kissed him goodbye in the mornings, but the warmth was gone. Her eyes lingered on him in a way that felt different, not adoring, not suspicious exactly, but watchful, like she was studying him, and Anthony hated being studied. One evening over dinner, he tried to test her. "So, there's a conference next month," he said casually, spearing a piece of steak with his fork. "I'll probably have to fly out for a few days." Essie's expression didn't change. She sipped her wine, set the glass down carefully, and asked, "Where's the conference?" "Chicago," he lied smoothly. Essie cut into her steak, the knife gliding through the meat without hesitation. "That'll be cold this time of year." Her voice was calm. To calm, Anthony waited for the questions that usually followed: which hotel? Who else is going? Can I come along? But none came. Essie simply ate, her face unreadable. The silence pressed against his chest until he finally muttered, "I'll bring you something back." Essie smiled faintly. "Don't bother. I already have everything I need." That night, as Anthony lay in bed pretending to sleep, he cracked one eye open. Essie sat at her desk across the room, papers spread in front of her, her face illuminated by the glow of the lamp. She was writing something, her pen moving quickly across the page. He couldn't see what it was, but the sight sent a prickling unease down his spine. The following day, Anthony stopped by the bank during his lunch break. He asked for a copy of their joint account activity, something he hadn't bothered to check in months. The clerk handed him the printout, and as Anthony scanned the charges, a chill settled in his gut. Several transactions were marked with yellow HIGH, LIGHTER. Not by the bank, by Essie. When he came home that night, Essie was folding laundry in the living room. Anthony dropped his briefcase a little harder than usual, watching her carefully. "You were at the bank today?" he asked casually. Essie didn't look up. "I handle the bills. You know that." He stepped closer, studying her face. She didn't flinch, didn't even pause her folding. "You highlight something," he pressed finally. Essie met his eyes. Her gaze was calm, steady, almost chilling. "I highlight everything." For a moment, Anthony's throat went dry. He forced a laugh to cover it. "That's my organized girl." But when he kissed her cheek, she didn't smile. Anthony started watching her more closely after that. He checked his phone twice as often, made sure to delete messages and clear browser history. He even considered changing his passcode. But no matter what he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that Essie was always one step ahead. One Saturday morning, Essie announced she was going to the farmer's market with Carla. Anthony's jaw tightened. He didn't like Carla. The woman had never trusted him, and he suspected she had Essie's ear more than he wanted. "You're spending a lot of time with her lately," he said, trying to sound casual. Essie shrugged. "Carla's been my friend for 20 years. That's not going to change." Anthony leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You're not talking about me, are you?" Essie slipped on her coat, her back to him. "If I were, do you think you'd know?" She walked out before he could answer. That afternoon, Anthony sat alone in the living room, replaying her words. "If I were, do you think you'd know?" The question rattled inside him like a loose coin in a jar. He had always thought of Essie as predictable, loving, trusting, maybe a little too soft, but now she felt like a stranger living in his house, and strangers were dangerous. A few days later, Anthony decided to test her again. He slipped a receipt from a hotel bar into his pocket, one from a night Essie didn't know about, and left it crumpled in the laundry basket, waiting to see if she would react. She did. That evening, as they folded laundry together, Essie pulled the receipt from the basket. She smoothed it flat, her expression unreadable, then set it quietly on the dresser. Not a word, not an accusation, just silence. And somehow, that silence was worse than any screaming fight could have been. Anthony lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, while Essie's breathing stayed slow and even beside him. "She knows," he thought. "She knows, but she's not saying anything. Why?" The question gnawed at him, burrowing deeper with each passing day. The tension in the house became unbearable. Meals were short, conversations shorter. Anthony tried to reassert control, buying Essie flowers, taking her out to dinner, even suggesting a weekend trip. She smiled, accepted the gifts, went to the dinners, but her eyes told a different story. They weren't the eyes of a woman in love. They were the eyes of a woman waiting, and Anthony didn't know what she was waiting for. The breaking point came one night when Anthony returned home late. Essie was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in her hands, her expression calm. "You're late," she said. Anthony loosened his tie. "Work ran over." Essie nodded slowly. "Of course." The way she said it made his skin crawl. He slammed his briefcase on the counter, his voice rising. "What's that supposed to mean?" Essie took a sip of her tea, her gaze never leaving his. "It means I don't need explanations anymore." Her tone was so steady, so assured, that Anthony felt a rare flicker of fear. That night, as he lay in bed beside her, Anthony stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. Essie wasn't the same woman he had charmed, manipulated, and drained dry. Something had shifted. And for the first time, Anthony wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was the one being played. The storm broke on a Tuesday night. Anthony had come home later than usual, reeking of whiskey and expensive cologne, his tie crooked and his eyes bloodshot. He stumbled into the living room where Essie sat quietly, a neat stack of papers spread across the coffee table. For a moment, he froze. The sight of her there calm, composed, and waiting made his stomach twist. "What's all this?" he demanded, gesturing at the papers. Essie looked up, her face unreadable. "Bills, statements, you know, the things that keep this house running." Anthony's jaw tightened. He reached for one of the papers, but Essie slid it out of his grasp with a steady hand. "These aren't for you," she said softly. "Not yet." For the first time, Anthony raised his voice. "Damn it, Essie. What are you hiding?" She didn't flinch. She simply leaned back, folding her hands in her lap. "I could ask you the same thing." The silence that followed was sharp, electric. Anthony's chest heaved, his face flushed, but Essie's calm only unnerved him more. The next morning, Anthony tried a different approach. He left a bouquet of roses on the kitchen counter, a box of chocolates beside them. When Essie walked in, she paused, glanced at the gifts, and gave a faint smile. "They're lovely," she said. "Almost enough to distract me from the fact that you've been draining our account." Anthony's blood ran cold. Her words weren't shouted, not even angry. They were delivered the way one might comment on the weather, simple, undeniable, impossible to ignore. "Essie," he forced a chuckle. "Baby, it's not like that. You've got it all wrong." She turned, her eyes locking on his. "Do I?" For the first time, Anthony had no answer. Over the next week, Essie shifted from passive observation to quiet confrontation. She no longer pretended to believe his excuses. When he said he was working late, she simply nodded. When he claimed his phone had died, she replied, "Of course it did." Each response was a knife wrapped in velvet, soft in tone, sharp in meaning. Anthony began to unravel. His temper flared at small things, a misplaced sock, a dinner served lukewarm, the way Essie looked at him without blinking, but every outburst only made him look more guilty, more desperate. One evening, Essie decided it was time to draw blood. She waited until Anthony had settled on the couch with his drink, the television flickering with the evening news. Then she walked in with a manila envelope and set it on the coffee table. "What's this?" Anthony asked, frowning. "Open it," Essie said. Inside were photocopies, hotel receipts, credit card statements, and several blurry photos Carla had snapped of him entering a downtown hotel with his mistress. Anthony's face drained of color. "Where did you?" "Don't bother asking," Essie interrupted smoothly. "The better question is, how much longer did you think you could hide it?" Anthony's hands trembled as he shuffled through the pages. His mind scrambled for excuses, but every lie felt flimsy in the face of so much evidence. Finally, he slammed the papers down. "You've been spying on me." Essie tilted her head. "Collecting the truth isn't spying, it's preparing." Anthony surged to his feet, pacing the room like a trapped animal. "So what? You think you can just throw this in my face? What are you gonna do, Essie? Leave me, after everything I've done for you?" Essie let out a soft laugh, the kind that cut deeper than any scream. "Everything you've done for me? You mean the lies, the theft, the humiliation?" Anthony's chest heaved. "You don't understand." "I know," Essie said sharply, her calm cracking just enough to reveal the steel beneath. "You don't understand. You took my money, my trust, my love, and threw it away on cheap nights in hotel rooms. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I was too weak to fight back." Anthony froze, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. And Essie leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You were wrong." The next few days were hell inside that house. Anthony tried everything: apologies, gifts, even threats. He begged one minute, raged the next, but nothing moved Essie. She continued her routine as if nothing had changed. Her calm demeanor, a wall he couldn't penetrate. Worse, he began to suspect she had more than just receipts. Something about the way she carried herself, the quiet confidence, the knowing smiles, made him feel as though she was holding a weapon he couldn't see. And he was right, because what Anthony didn't know was that Essie had already met with Marjorie again. The lawsuit paperwork was drafted, ready to be filed at any moment. One signature, and Anthony's entire facade would collapse. That Sunday, during dinner, Anthony finally broke. "Essie," he said, slamming his fork down, "what do you want from me? You want me to grovel? Fine, I'm sorry, I messed up, okay? But you're my woman. You can't just turn on me like this." Essie set her fork down gently, wiped her mouth with her napkin, and looked him in the eye. "What I want," she said softly, "is justice." Anthony blinked. "Justice, yes." Essie stood, her chair scraping softly against the floor. "And I'm done waiting for it." That night, As Anthony lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a chill spread through his chest. Essie had changed. She wasn't his fool anymore. She was his enemy, and somehow, she already had the upper hand. The official papers arrived on a Wednesday morning. Anthony had just stumbled into the kitchen, half awake, when the sharp knock on the door rattled the house. He opened it to find a uniformed courier holding a thick envelope with his name printed in bold letters. Anthony Caldwell. Yeah, consider yourself served. The man shoved the envelope into his hands and walked away without another word. Anthony stared at the papers, his gut tightening. When he tore the seal open, his worst fears spilled onto the page. Fraud, misappropriation of funds, breach of trust, filed by none other than Essie James. He stormed into the living room, his voice echoing off the walls. Essie, she appeared from the hallway. As ever, a cup of coffee in her hand. What is this? He snarled, waving the papers. Essie sipped her coffee. It's justice. In writing. Anthony's face turned crimson. You filed a lawsuit against me. Yes, Essie replied simply, and this is only the beginning. For the first time, Anthony felt the walls of the house closing in. He wasn't just fighting whispers or suspicions anymore, he was fighting the law. He spent the next 2 days in a frenzy, calling lawyers, begging for advice, but every attorney he spoke to asked the same question. Do they have evidence? And when Anthony hesitated, they knew the answer. At home, the tension reached a breaking point. One evening, Anthony cornered Essie in the kitchen. His hands gripped the counter on either side of her, his breath hot with anger. You think you can destroy me, he hissed. You think some stupid papers will take me down? Essie looked up at him, unflinching. No, the truth will. Anthony's fist slammed against the counter, inches from her hand. I made you, Essie. Without me, you're nothing. But his words rang hollow, even to himself, because in that moment, looking into her steady eyes, Anthony realized something terrifying. He was the one who was nothing without her. Desperation pushed him to his lowest. The next day, he showed up at Maya's apartment unannounced. Maya, he said, his voice trembling with rehearsed sincerity, your mother's making a huge mistake. She's angry, she's confused, and she's trying to ruin me. But if you talk to her, if you just get her to see reason, maybe we can fix this. Maya's eyes narrowed. Fix this? You mean cover up what you did? Anthony froze. She told you? She didn't have to, Maya snapped. I've known for months something was wrong, and now I know exactly what it is. Anthony reached for her arm. Please, Maya. She yanked it back. Don't you dare use me to save yourself. You used my mother enough. She slammed the door in his face. Anthony drove home, shaking with rage. The streets blurred before him, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. For the first time, he realized he was truly alone. Even Maya had chosen Essie's side. That night, he confronted Essie again, his voice raw. You're going to regret this. You think you can embarrass me in court, ruin my reputation. I'll drag your name through the mud. I'll make you wish you'd never met me. Essie stood at the sink, calmly washing a plate. She dried it, set it aside, and then turned to face him. I already regret meeting you, Anthony, she said softly, but what I don't regret is fighting back. She walked past him without another word, leaving him alone in the kitchen. Shaking with fury. Over the next week, Anthony spiraled. He called his mistress less, and drank more. His once perfect composure cracked. He forgot to shave, missed work meetings, snapped at friends. Meanwhile, Essie grew stronger. She met with Marjorie twice a week, refining their case. She gathered more documents, recorded Anthony's rants, even secured sworn statements from Carla and Maya. Every move Anthony made only tightened the noose. One evening, Marjorie laid the final piece on the table, a subpoena for Anthony's financial records. This will crush him, she said confidently. Once the court sees how he funneled your money into personal expenses, he won't just lose the case, he could face criminal charges. Essie inhaled deeply, her chest heavy but steady. She hadn't wanted to destroy Anthony. Once, she had loved him. Once, she had dreamed of growing old by his side. But those dreams were gone, replaced by something stronger, the will to survive. That night, Anthony tried one last time. He found Essie in the bedroom, packing away old clothes into a donation box. His voice cracked as he spoke. Essie, please, don't do this. We can start over. I'll change. She didn't look up. You had your chance to change. Anthony dropped to his knees, his hands clutching hers. I need you. I can't. Essie pulled away. You don't need me. You need someone to use, and that's not me anymore. Her words landed like a hammer. shattering the last illusion Anthony had clung to. Later, as Essie lay in bed, she whispered to herself, "It's almost over. One more push, and I'll be free." But she also knew something else. Anthony wasn't done fighting. And the most dangerous enemy was one with nothing left to lose. The courtroom buzzed with nervous whispers as the bailiff called the case. James versus Caldwell. Essie rose from her seat at the plaintiff's table, smoothing the front of her navy dress. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. Marjorie stood beside her, poised and sharp in a gray suit, radiating the kind of calm authority Essie had leaned on for months. Across the aisle, Anthony sat hunched at the defense table. His once polished appearance was gone. His tie was crooked, his eyes bloodshot, his shoulders slumped. The man who had once strutted through life like he owned it now looked like a shadow of himself. The judge entered. "Be seated." The trial began. Marjorie opened with a voice that cut through the courtroom like steel. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about betrayal, about a woman who trusted, who gave everything she had financially and emotionally, to a man she believed loved her, and about how that man exploited her trust, drained her savings, and left her nearly penniless. Today, you will see the truth, and the truth will set my client, Essie James, free." Essie sat tall, her chest rising with each word. Anthony's attorney, a slick, younger man clearly paid with what remained of Essie's money, rose next. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a story of betrayal. This is a story of misunderstanding, of a woman who willingly shared her finances in a loving relationship, and now, out of bitterness, seeks to rewrite history. We will prove that Anthony Caldwell acted in good faith, and that Essie James has no claim here." Anthony nodded vigorously, but even he didn't look convinced. The evidence spoke louder than words. Marjorie presented bank statements showing the slow, systematic draining of Essie's savings. She showed wire transfers from Essie's account into Anthony's business ventures that were little more than personal spending sprees. The jury's eyes widened when they saw the receipts. Vacations with the mistress, expensive gifts, luxury dinners, all paid for with Essie's money. Then came the witnesses. Carla testified first, her voice trembling but clear. "I worked for them. I saw Anthony using Essie's cards. I overheard him bragging about how he didn't need a job because Essie paid for everything. When I asked him about it once, he laughed in my face." Maya took the stand next. Her voice broke as she looked at her mother. "I told my mom not to marry him, but she loved him, and he took advantage of that love. He used her kindness until there was nothing left. I watched her cry herself to sleep, more nights than I can count." Essie fought back tears, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When Anthony took the stand, the atmosphere shifted. He tried to smile, tried to charm, but his words fell flat. "I never stole anything," he said, his voice defensive. "Essie gave me access. She wanted to support me. If she regrets it now, that's not my fault." Marjorie leaned forward. "Mr. Caldwell, are you saying the vacations with your mistress were paid for, with Ms. James's blessing?" Anthony's face went pale. That's not what and the jewelry you bought another woman, the hotel bills, the apartment lease in another city, all out of Essie's account. Was that her idea too?" The courtroom gasped. Anthony stammered, his facade unraveling under the weight of the truth. "No further questions," Marjorie said coolly, returning to her seat. The closing arguments sealed the fate. Marjorie's voice was steady, powerful. "Essie James is not here today because she wants revenge. She is here because she wants justice. She is here because women like her, women who give, who love, who trust, should not be left broken and betrayed by men who see kindness as weakness. The evidence is clear. The betrayal is undeniable. Hold him accountable." The defense attorney muttered something about love gone sour, but his words fell flat, like a desperate man grasping at smoke. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. When they returned, the 4 women stood tall. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Essie James. We award damages of $250,000. Essie's breath caught in her throat. Tears welled in her eyes as the words sank in. She had won. She had taken back her life. Anthony slumped in his chair, his face drained of all color. For once, he had no words, no charm, no control. The judge's gavel came down. Case closed. Outside the courthouse, the autumn sun warmed Essie's skin. Marjorie hugged her tightly. "You did it. You stood tall." Maya rushed to her mother's side, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you, Mom." Essie smiled, wiping her eyes. "I'm proud of me too." For the first time in years, she felt free. Weeks later, Life began to bloom again. Essie moved into a new apartment, a smaller place, but hers alone. She started volunteering at a community center, mentoring young women about financial independence. She opened a savings account, this time in her name only. The nights no longer felt heavy, the mornings no longer felt bleak. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the city lights twinkle, Essie whispered to herself, "I am not broken, I am whole, and I will never let anyone steal that from me again." She raised a glass of wine to the sky, to freedom, to resilience, to the woman she had become. Anthony faded into obscurity. The mistress left him. His reputation crumbled. He was just another man who thought he could steal everything and walk away untouched. But Essie's name carried a different weight now. She was no longer the woman who had been betrayed. She was the woman who had fought back, the woman who had won,